NBA anti-tanking proposal. Now, I needed a minute to digest it. The article was very, very long. And so I took that time, and this is obviously not the first attempt of the NBA with addressing tanking, but this is reportedly set to go to vote here, if not this week, in the coming month before the season's over. And this is after years of criticism from fans, people inside the organizations, and even leadership, owners, about teams intentionally losing games to improve their draft odds. And something they've tried to combat in the past by flattening the lottery odds and implementing things like the play-in tournament. However, the issue has not left. In fact, it's pivoted into something greater than an issue. It seems like it's more so a strategy. And keep that in mind, because the whole idea of it being a strategy rather than an issue is going to come up later when I discuss why these rules might not help anything. And so, what I want to say right now, what we're seeing is, instead of it being labeled as tanking, it's being what is it called, like masked or covered up, or they're saying it's one thing, but this is really what it is. They're saying it's rest or injury management, but it's really tanking. They're saying it's sitting our stars so others can get developmental minutes, but it's really tanking. Like, they could maybe go as far as signing 10-day contracts in April, just so they can say they're trying to see if they're putting guys on to contracts so they can rest other guys. Do you see where I'm going with this? Like, no offense to Markelle Fultz, but I mean, well, I wouldn't say that I think it was the Raptors that he signed a 10-day with. So I don't know if that's actually a good example of a 10-day sign. But there was a team that signed a 10-day player. It might have been the Mavericks. Some team that's not even in the playoffs that signed a 10-day player. I just got to look it up. I think that could even be a small instance of someone trying to tank. Not saying a 10-day player couldn't turn it around, but let's be for real. You see what I'm saying? So I think it's a strategy. I think it's a byproduct of the system that has occurred over the years. And when I made my comment about the NBA possibly tainting the WNBA, my main point had to do with this tanking scenario. Because if owners, organizations are willing to do this now, what makes you think they're going to stop at just the NBA? What makes you think this type of culture isn't going to bleed out into the WNBA? I don't know why anybody would think that they would be exempt. You think behaviors and patterns change? Obviously, they don't, no matter what kind of rules you implement. Because right now, these policies just seem to be how to make this less bad as opposed to how to improve the competition. Does that make sense what I'm saying? This feels like a Band-Aid, and I'm going to get more into what this is. So for anyone who hasn't read up on the 3 main proposals of this anti-tanking policy, or maybe read up on it, didn't like register, because it took me a couple reads, right? So as simplified as possible, the first one is you can't keep being bad and get rewarded for it. So if you are bad multiple years in a row, for instance, you can't keep getting the top draft pick. So if you finish in the bottom 3, you could get a pick, but then the following year, you may not be allowed another pick. An emphasis on may not, because who knows how they'll continue to expand on this rule or how they'll implement it. But the goal is obviously to stop teams for stacking losses for multiple years. And if you look at the league right now in its current state, there's 30% of teams that are losing and are doing bad. So that means 30% of the games that we watch could possibly be tanked or not entertaining, because these teams are looking at the bigger picture for the sake of their organization. Second point. So again, the first point is you can't keep being bad and get rewarded. So you won't be able to get first round picks or top picks multiple years in a row. Okay. Next one is your draft odds could freeze mid-season. So your draft position could get locked in probably before the All-Star game, maybe. So that means middle of the season. And you can't just have late season tanking. So we won't be in a month like we're heading into April and we'll see a whole bunch of fake injuries. And as a fantasy basketball player coming out of my 3rd year playing, it is ridiculous how many injuries. If I'm in a league, I always ask the commissioner, how long is the league period for? Because if it goes longer than March, I don't want to play. I barely want to play if it goes all the way to March, because the injuries are insane. It's no way it's a coincidence. And then number 3 is we're looking at multi-year performance. So instead of just one bad season where the draft odds are just based on 1 year, they now would be based on a 2-year performance. So you can't be good, suddenly tank, and then get rewarded for that. And so that the league is pretty much saying we're going to start looking at the bigger picture. There's some additional things added to the conversation, like teams can't pick top 4 in back-to-back years, or teams that just made deep playoff runs can't suddenly jump to top picks. And then maybe with the expansion of the 2 new teams, that can then help the pool and the odds, essentially. But all of these ideas, I'm not sold on them. And what we see is when they make implementations of rules like this, the lasting impacts that they have, we have to be retroactive to it instead of proactive. For instance, the 65 game rule was implemented after Joel Embiid won his MVP. And now that we have it, Cade Cunningham suffered this injury that was totally off the court related, unless you're like one of those conspiracy theorists and you think it has something to do with the COVID shots, but that's a whole nother conversation. But it's allegedly off the court related, and now the players union is pushing back and saying abolish the rule because guys like Cade Cunningham deserve to win MVP despite him not being able to play and miss as many games as another guy. So we're seeing the impacts because and I can see why the players union would push to abolish that. But if they implement this policy, here's where my thoughts started to form when I was looking at each of the rules, right? For instance, that second policy would freeze the draft odds mid-season. I don't like that proposal because I think it just pushes the timeline up. Instead of teams tanking in April, then they'll just start tanking in January. What's to stop them from tanking? If they're like, oh, well, if they're going to freeze it before the trade deadline, well, then bet we could just call the season right now. And these guys who make millions of dollars, I mean, I can definitely see some of them just being on board with it. Like, oh, I'm locked in with this team for 2 more years. I'm protected, or whatever the case may be, and they're like, I can make millions of dollars by just sitting and chilling. Bet who's to stop them from doing that? So April versus January, I don't see that helping. Another thing about the no repeated top picks, I think there are some teams that are just genuinely terrible, like they just suck. You feel me? If they were to implement this draft rule, I think that would then punish teams that are genuinely bad. What if they do keep getting repeated missed opportunities to rebuild their team? Like, what if that really were to happen? I think not every bad team is tanking. I don't want to look at this as like I'm trying to accuse every single person. Me personally, I don't look at life like that. I don't think life is too black and white. It's way more complicated. So I don't want to punish incompetence. As much as I can't stand an incompetent person, or at least a person who has passed the seniority of competence. You feel what I'm saying? And they got to that point where, bro, you should know what you're doing by now. But for the most part, I don't want to punish the people that are really struggling, but this is what's going to happen with the rule. Like, this is the consequences and the casualties that happen when they start making drastic changes. And they say it in Adam Silver because it's for the sake of competition. But I don't see how it seems more like punishment rather than incentive, because if you want to up the play of competition, I don't know if taking this route is truly going to help that in the long picture. So I'm going to check the chat to see what everyone's saying. What's up? We got Clayton in the chat. Welcome back. Randy Mayo, welcome back to the chat. We got someone new in here. C Money's 007. Let's see what they're talking about. You can't stop tanking. Every team can't win 30 games. Mathematically, there has to be teams at the bottom. Yep. Says, and C Money said the NBA wants more drama for the play-in tournament. Oh, well, thank you. Is it Wash You Love Hada? I appreciate you. But back to basketball, Clayton said, I think teams are tanking to build super teams through the draft, etc. I mean, I think the current state of the game for these organizations, obviously money is at the top, is the number one goal. And I get you want fans in your seats. Like before De'Aaron Fox got to the Kings, that crowd was looking pretty thin. And then he got there and we started to see the crowd pick up. You feel what I'm saying? But it took them a long time to rebuild. I mean, look at my beloved Wizards. And I say beloved because I'm in Baltimore, so we're not DMV, but that's the closest we're gonna get to a team. And so to see them get a Trae Young and an AD, that's definitely gonna that raised the ticket price already drastically. So and they got those guys through trades, not even through the draft. So I know it's possible to eventually get to that point, but there was a lot of things that they had a lot of years that they had to give up to get to there. I mean, John Wall's been gone for over a decade on this team. So it took him over a decade to maybe get some star power back on their team. That's kind of crazy and wild to think about. And so if they were to implement this rule, I would say teams like the Wizards are going to continue to be Wizard teams it's going to take them decades to turn it around. Not everybody can pick gems like Shea. Not everybody's OKC and can just spot gems and pick them out that well. But I don't want teams to get stuck in mediocrity. That's not fun. I don't want to keep punishing teams. But we also need to hold these other teams and organizations accountable across the board and continue that. What I think I don't like is how blanketed this is. I want some action being taken. I want true penalties for these teams because I think Adam Silver is also trying to appease all these people because he has a board that he has to answer to just like everybody else does when you're at a head of his position. So I feel like sometimes Adam Silver, he walks that thin line. He might do it better than Kathy Engelbert over there in the WNBA world. But I think he's always talking about, I'm advocating for the product of basketball. I'm this and I'm that. But I think he's really saying, hey, I want you to the owners. He's saying, I want you to make as much money as possible. You feel what I'm saying? I feel like those are the conversations he's having. I don't even think he prioritizes things like tanking or players and their behaviors on the court. Like I don't think he emphasizes that when he talks to the owners. I don't. I think Adam Silver is a money guy. I don't think he truly cares about the state of basketball. So that's why when he's putting out all these policies and we're voting on this, look, we're making a genuine push to change the current state of the game for the sake of the fans. That's a whole bunch of BS. I don't believe that. And that even goes to show to the markets that they're expanding into. Look at Vegas. Gambling is, you know what? Anyway, let me see what the chat's saying. I appreciate everyone tuning in. If you're new, thank you so much for deciding to click on my channel and stick around. I always love when you drop conversations in the chat. Like this is why I started my channel. I just love basketball. It taught me how to love. I love talking about it. And so this is so much fun to me. And I'm glad that this community continues to grow. Smash that like button, subscribe, and let's keep moving. Any last thoughts about the tanking proposal before we go? Because I said what I want to say, but I also want to just keep seeing how it develops. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself and be too much of a Debbie Downer about their efforts, but I think they're not necessarily efforts. I think they're more so trying to prevent it from being bad as opposed to continuing to elevate the competition. And I also don't want to be that person who, when someone brings a lot of criticism to the table and then doesn't bring any solution to maybe help improve it. The only thing I can say right now without getting too in depth with the big visions is continue to focus on elevating the competition and whatever that looks like. I don't think these anti-tanking and starting off with the draft and focusing on that helps elevate the current competition in the league. I do think it's still somewhat competitive, but we got to think maybe start fixing many rules or correct many behaviors that are happening in the league in general. For instance, and I'm not saying this can completely change the game, but I was watching Denver last night and Joker and how many illegal screens he set. And I know this kind of seems, but what if we actually focused on basketball itself and improving some of the rules that may have had a drastic impact on the game itself, as opposed to the product of it and the marketing of it? Like, keep it basketball focused, and maybe we could see some of the competitiveness increase. You feel what I'm saying? And maybe continue to shift how the refs are calling games and focus on that community, focus on the regulation aspect of the game as opposed to regulating the front office. Let's regulate the court, and maybe we could see some change from that. Like I would love to see maybe Joker not get away with so many moving screens. That could change some of the games, some of the competitiveness. You see what I'm saying? Or the Shea Gildress Alexander people who think he gets to the free throw line way too much. Maybe we do continue to change some of the rules of the game. But everything has consequences. Everything. So when I think it's a big deal when they make all these decisions because we don't get to see the impact until later down the line. And we can't see the future. We can only hope it can help with something. But if you already have the behaviors to continue to find loopholes, and that just seems what the NBA loves to do is find a loophole to help their organization continue to go in the right direction of making money or whatever the case may be. That's what they're gonna do. They found loopholes on paying players, and somehow the Clippers get off the hook, but somehow now it's Kawhi's fault. What? You see what I'm saying? So we gotta I don't know. We gotta hold them accountable in some type of capacity. It starts with Adam Silver, it starts with the owners, and then it goes down the line from there. But I hate the fact that they piss on our face and then tell us it's raining. They stay doing that. It really, really bothers me. Well, we'll continue to search for solutions. We'll continue to cover the search for solutions. And like I said, these policies are set to vote soon. So we'll know what they reach if they decide on all three options, or they decide only one, maybe some of the changes that they'll make while they're deciding and all of that. I would love to look more into it so I can learn more. But we'll see.